forward to this because anybody that's a friend of Frida Kelly's is a friend of mine. And Billy Kinsley is here, and his presence is very welcome because before I met him, I heard, oh, you're going to love Billy, from people I trust and respect and love. And they were right, he's terrific. And Billy was in a group called the Merseybeats.
They're still out, so they're still doing all over the world, except America.
Oh, you didn't break up? No, well, you know, we were, those of us that were total Beatle nerds were where every band that lived in England, I think, even if we didn't hear them. And as I told you last night, your band inspired me to name my band the Merseybeats, because girls were birds in England. And
did you make that up for us then?
Please?
Did you make that up for us?
Yes,
okay.
yeah.
She admits it.
I sent you a check to thank you, but I guess it got lost in the mail. But anyway, you brought some slides and things to show, and let's start with that, and then you can, you know, elaborate, because you have so many fantastic stories, because you were with these guys.
Yeah, actually, this is a very historical night. This is a club in Liverpool called the Odd Spot, and it was an odd spot. It was downstairs, like a lot of the clubs were in Liverpool. And it was the 29th of March 1962. And see those two guys on the right? Yeah? Well, the one closest is me.
Whoa!
When I was 15 years old, and Tony Crane is next to me. Now, we were the two lead singers in the Merseybeats. And we already knew the Beatles. We just started playing on the Cavern with them 3 or 4 times a week. Well, this is very special because Pete Best was still on drums actually, but you can't see Pete. This is the very, very, very first night that the Beatles wore suits. Wow. You know, Brian Epstein had been managing them only a couple of months, and he got them out of the jeans and the leather jackets and black t-shirts. And he finally got them to wear suits. So that is a very historical night actually. I never liked the suits. Yeah.
What were you wearing that night, sir?
Jeans. Yeah, that was a nice little club. It was a gambling club upstairs. And I think we played with them once more after that. And then Ringo joined them, and then they took off. And they came here. And that was the making of them, actually.
We remember that.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. Ah, right. This is a typical advert in either the Liverpool Echo or the Merseybeat newspaper in those days. The Undertakers weren't Undertakers, they were a band, obviously. The Searchers, well, you know the Searchers. I've toured America with the Searchers, yeah. Swinging Blue Jeans, you know. Terry Sylvester, who was on next, he was in the Swinging Blue Jeans, not then, but a couple of years later. The Big Three, anyone heard of the Big Three? They were a great band. I like the Beatles first, and then the Big Three for me were the second best. They were absolutely brilliant, but they were crazy. Say no more. Rory Stone and the Hurricanes is where Ringo came from. Big hand for Rory for giving the Beatles, or Ringo the Beatles. In fact, I never saw Ringo play with Rory. I was too young, and by the time I'd started playing in Liverpool, Rory Stone and the Hurricanes were like always in Hamburg or in the seaside resorts all over Britain. They used to play holiday camps for a season. So I never ever saw them, although I ran, when I was a little boy, I ran for Liverpool as a sprinter in the junior athletic team, and Rory was a senior. So we knew each other from there, and I didn't know he was Rory Stone. I just knew he was a great runner and then a great footballer, or soccer player, sorry. The Beatles, anyone heard of the Beatles? Well, they were pretty good as well. The Merseybeats, that was right. Jerry and the Pacemakers. Well, I'd just like to say, in 1973, when Jerry came out of the West End, the original Jerry and the Pacemakers had broken up, and he got a tour, one of the first British 10-year after invasion things tours, along with him and Turnant and everybody. and I got asked to be a pacemaker. So I was a pacemaker in America for about 4 or 5 months, and I really enjoyed it. That was the first time I ever played in America.
You know, Jerry was a guest here at the fest years ago,
Yeah.
and a couple got engaged in front of Jerry, and he said that he was trusting because he could have taken the fiance right then, because, you know, he's Jerry Marsden. I mean, he could have.
Really?
But he was very sweet, wonderful gentleman. And
Jerry's a great guy.
Yeah,
He's a good friend.
Lovely.
He hasn't been too well, but thank God he's getting better now.
Yeah, I heard his health was okay.
And
Good.
let me see, we're on King Size Taylor. Anyone heard of King Size Taylor in Domino's? Well, we only saw them in Liverpool because when they went to Hamburg before the Beatles, they actually stayed there and came home back to Liverpool just occasionally. And that's the end of that sort of little slide. Next slide, please. Guess where that is?
The Cavern? No?
The Cavern. Guess who the band is?
Merseybeats.
Spot on. Says the guy with the Merseybeats t-shirt on.
Where do you get a Merseybeats t-shirt? I want to get one.
Just go online, you get them online.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, okay. Okay, this is a typical session. This is probably about end of 1962, I'd say. No, mid-62. That is Aaron Williams on the left. That is me, second left, playing. I was the bass player. John Banks on drums and Tony Crane on lead guitar on that side. And we all sang. In fact, all of us sang, which was quite interesting then. And that was a typical Cavern Club crowd where you could only sit in the middle and stand up in the aisles. And there's a film of the Beatles on the Cavern. Have you seen that one? Well, they took one clip from the back of the stage, and you can see through all the Beatles, John, Paul, George, and Pete Best. No, Ringo was there, sorry. But Ringo's not on it. But I'm on it. I'm on one of those aisles looking at the Beatles. So I'm going to get it, you know, before I die, I'm going to get a clip from that. John, Paul, George, and Billy.
You held your guitar up high like Jerry does.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, John did as well. John Lennon used to hold his guitar there, and it became cool.
Yeah.
It doesn't look cool now.
You look cool. Are you kidding? Does he look cool?
You look cool.
Thank you. See, Billy, you're in the minority on that.
Next slide, please.
It looks so small. Is it really that small?
This is us again on the Cavern. And I'm going to tell you, see that great big thing at the back on the left-hand side?
The what?
The big amplifier on the left, at the back. They were the bass amps that we all used to have. And that's what made Liverpool bands very, very different to anyone in Britain, and probably America. Because that was a bass amp, and it was the biggest bass amp in the world. It was that high. And the Beatles had one, the Big Three had one first. Paul liked it that much that he asked the guy who built it, Johnny Gustafson, who was the bass player in the Big Three. He said he wanted one of them. And then I wanted one when I heard their basses, the sound of their basses, because it was so loud and heavy, and no one else had bass amps like that. So there was like 4 or 5 bands who had them. And someone asked me years later, they said, you were one of the bands, weren't you, who had those coffins? We used to call them coffins, remember that? And I said, yeah, how do you know? He said, because when we stood up the road from the Cavern, we could hear the bass at the top of the road, and it had to be the Beatles, the Big Three, or the Merseybeats. So we were the bands with the deep bass. Next slide,
Billy, we
please.
need to switch your mic here.
It's running out of batteries.
Running out of batteries.
What happens at this stage?
This is live on the Cavern. John Banks, great drummer. Tony.
Well,
create groups.
This dance was called the Cavern Stomp.
Oh, yes.
And we didn't know what stomp meant. That was an American expression. Well, that was christened the Cavern Stomp. And I find it very interesting. See what I mean? The cavern was a dungeon. It really didn't smell nice at all because there was sweat, condensation, and people smoked in those days. Remember when everybody smoked? Luckily enough, there was no alcohol there. You'd go to the pub before you went in there. But it didn't smell nice at all. Sorry to tell you that. But it's true. Next slide, please. This is an advert that was going to be on the Cavern. This is a fortnightly paper called the Merseybeats newspaper. And it was great. We were the only city in Britain who had their own music paper. This is 1961. Unbelievable. And I think this is one of the very first ones. Oh no, it can't be because we're on it and we didn't start till, well, we led the Merseybeats until 62. So this must be 1962. And this is, oh no, sorry, this is the last time the Beatles played on the Cavern. This is 3rd of August 1963. And they had 2 #1 records and they came back. They came back to Liverpool to say goodbye to the fans, basically. All the fans had been supporting them for quite a few years. And it was great. It was a great day, but a lot of things went wrong. And as you can see, we supported them. The Escorts, who Terry was in as well, before the Swinging Blue Jeans. The Roadrunners, the Sapphires, Johnny Ringo and the Colts. They were called Johnny Ringo and the Colts because their guitarist was Ringo's cousin.
Oh.
So he had permission to use the name Ringo in the band. As I say, that was the last time the Beatles ever played on the Cavern, and it was quite disastrous because they let too many people in. And it was the 3rd of August. It was nearly 90 degrees outside, so you can imagine how hot it was in the cellar. With 1 door in and 1 door out, the same door. That's what it was like. No AC or anything like that. And we finished our set, it went down great. We stormed it, and the Beatles were waiting to go on in a tiny little band room at the side of the stage. And they were pretty scared because they said, you've gone down great, the Escorts went down great. What about, do you think we're going to go? And I said, you're kidding. You are kidding. They went on stage. Halfway through their first number, all the power went off. There was condensation coming down the walls and it crept into the electric circuit and blew the power. And thank God there was one light on, one little white bulb on. So the Beatles being the Beatles, with no amplifiers working, no guitars to play, Paul went on the piano, and John played his Rickenbacker, without an amp. So it sounded like, that's all it sounded like. But Paul was on the piano, and he went into a song which we didn't know. And we knew his dad had been around in music hall times, well, not music hall times, but his dad had been in a band in the 20s and everything. So we thought it was an old song of his dad's, because it sounded like an old song. And it wasn't until Sgt. Pepper came out that we found out what the song was. When I get older, losing my head, many years from now. That was the song. And that was the debut of that song on August 3rd, 1963. That didn't come out until Sgt. Pepper.
67? Yeah. You want to hear a funny story about that? I know you're supposed to be telling stories, but I was interviewing Paul a few years ago, and he hadn't turned 64 yet. And so at the end of the interview, he said, "So Terry, tell me something about yourself. I've met you several times. I know nothing. Tell me something." And I thought, crap, I got to make it good. I told him about my mother, who was in a retirement home, and she was doing she was a pianist and a singer, and she was doing a recital. The Bees. Betty plays Beatles, or Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, Bartok, Basie, and the Beatles. And I said, well, that's nice. What Beatles songs are you doing? Yesterday, because all the old people like that. And when I'm 64, but I'm changing to when I'm 84, because everybody in the retirement home is over 64. I have on tape Paul laughing his rear end off. I mean, he started singing it. when I'm 84. And then he went on, and I played that on the air, and people started emailing me, Paul's talking about your mama on the Ellen DeGeneres song. Paul's talking about your mama on NPR, on Good Morning America, and all these shows. And sure enough, he was going around telling that story. So my mother went to her grave. That was one of the most precious things in her life, that Paul got a big kick out of it.
Brilliant.
And I talked to him on the phone a couple years later, and he said, and I said, I was the one that told you about the mother, because he couldn't see me on the phone, about the mother doing what. He says, oh, I was thinking of doing it myself. I said, well, I checked with her, and she said, no lawyers, don't worry, go ahead, you have my permission. He goes, oh, thanks, Terry's mom, thank you. But he just loved that story, and my mother was thrilled that Paul talked about it so much, when I'm 84. So that's sort of like the bookends. You told the first, and I told the last. That song.
So do you want to carry on, because your story's better?
No, I don't think your story's much better. But I thought you might want to know that. But Paul, with a great sense of humor, really,
Yeah, I know.
loved it.
I've
He loved it.
I've had a sense of humor many times in my ear. Next slide,
Is that a
please.
good thing? Or?
Oh, this is also our first record was a song called It's Love That Really Counts, which was a Shirelle song. A Bacharach and David song. Apparently we were the first in England to record a Bacharach and David song, which was our first single. It made the top 30, and records were selling that much in that period that we sold nearly 250,000 records and didn't even get into the top 20, which was unheard of. Because all the other bands, you know, were like the Beatles and Jerry and the Pacemakers, Searchers, Stones, they were keeping us at the top 20 with their great records.
You got paid though, right?
Pardon?
You got paid though, right?
That's another story.
Oh, yeah.
Next slide, please.
Oh,
Who's
Dusty! Hey, Dusty. Where are you?
I'm on the second on the right at the back.
Okay, cute.
Tony, Billy, Aaron and John. Who's the guy in the front?
Burt Bacharach.
No one knows who that is?
Burt.
Burt Bacharach, yeah. Who's the lady in the front?
Dusty Springfield.
Dusty, yeah. This was 1965, and by that time, Burt Bacharach and Hal David were having many hits, you know, with Dionne Warwick, Civil Black, Dusty, us, you know. We had the hit in England with Wishing and Hoping, top 20 hit with it, and we were on, as you, well, on the slide before, we were on Fontana Records, which was part of Philips Records, which was basically a European record company. And strangely enough, we had the hit in England, but they didn't release our version in America. They released Dusty Springfield's.
Yeah.
So Dusty had a hit over here with Wishing and Hoping, and we missed out. Next slide, please.
Yay, Dusty.
This is us looking up. I don't know what we're looking up, but this is down by the River Thames in London, when it was all being renovated, and they were building a new big concert hall there. And it was weird actually, because on the other side of the road there was still all the bomb damage from the war. And this is 1965, you know. So London, and especially Liverpool, was still heavily, I don't know, well, everywhere you looked there was still bomb damage. And we used to play football when we were kids on the damage. It was all glass and bricks and everything. It made you become a man when you played football on a pitch like that, you know. So, yeah, I don't know why that one's there, but we must have got new Polar Neck sweaters and showing them off. Yeah, next slide please. This is one of my great friends is Mike McCartney. Anyone met Mike here?
Mike's great. He was here many times.
Yeah, he's a great friend.
Great guy.
This was his wedding. That's me in the middle, that's my daughter Sarah, who's here tonight. And guess who the fellow on the right is?
Mike's brother.
Yeah. And at the back is their cousin, Ted.
Your daughter's here now, though?
So yeah?
Your daughter's here now?
Yeah, my
Yeah,
two
where is
girls
she?
are here.
Oh,
Yeah.
where are they?
There's Sarah there, that's her.
Hey, stand up and say Yay, welcome.
Sarah Kinsley. When she was a little girl. That was a great day. Really good day. The sun was shining, absolutely beautiful. And And I hadn't seen Paul for a couple of years, and we really caught up with some great stories. Because if you don't see your friends for a couple of years, you remember the stories that they'd like. And we giggled a lot and laughed a lot. Next one, please.
See, I want to meet your daughters because when we have the Fest for Billy fans, I'll have them up here telling stories about you, okay? Okay? That work? Okay. There you go.
Oh, this is another time. I can't remember what this one is. That's my wife Sandra on the left. She's here as well. That's me, Paul, Linda, and another cousin of Paul and Mike's. I don't know whether it was this one, but the last time I saw Paul at one of Mike's parties, I think it was being filmed, and I was talking to someone, and everyone who was in front of me started laughing and giggling because someone was creeping up behind me, right? And then suddenly whoever it was picked me up and put me over his shoulder, and it was Paul. And I still didn't know. I was on somebody's back and I didn't know who it was. And he threw me on the floor and started giggling. Yeah. Next one, please. Do you recognise anybody on there? Okay, here's a clue. I'm having problems at the moment. I'm a guitarist and I've got a lot of problems. I know, what's that? What's that? That's a bad finger. Very bad finger. Until I get it fixed. There's Joey Molland, right in the middle. You can tell his eyes coming. Now Joey is one of my best friends ever. Yeah, he's great, Joey. And we were together there for about a year. We were the Merseys, the two at the front. The Merseybeats had broken up, so there was just two of us. The two lead singers, me and Tony, in the front. And they were called the Fruit-Eating Bears. I'm trying to remember the German name because our manager, Kit Lambert and Chris Stamp, who also managed The Who. Kit he spoke a lot of German. And when he was embarrassed to say the name for the band, so he told me their name in German, and it was Die Fluchen Essendenbergen. And I said, that's not a very good name for a band, And then he said, no, seriously, it's the Fruit-Eating Bears. And I said, that's still not a very good name. But they became the Fruit-Eating Bears, and they're all still around, thank God. All great friends of mine still. Round of applause for the Fruit-Eating Bears with Joey Molland. I also, a couple of years later, I was working at, at the end of the 60s, I was working at Apple with Jackie Lomax. And I knew a band called the Ivies, who became, obviously, Badfinger. And they were looking for a bass player. And I was going to go for the job because I'm a bass player. And then they changed their mind. The guitarist went on bass, so they were looking for a lead guitarist. And I said to Joe, look Joe, you've got to go. I know the Ivies, they're a great band, they've had a small hit. But we knew the Ivies because they've written a great song called Maybe Tomorrow, which the Merseys wanted to record, but they never finished it. They didn't, they'd written the song without a middle eight, or a bridge or anything. So time went on and we never got to record it, but we heard a lot of their material, and I knew they were great writers and great singers, So I literally had to push Joey on the train at Lime Street Station in Liverpool, where he went straight, to Savile Row, met them, joined them, and that's Joey Molland, Badfinger, and sadly, he's the only one left. Well, we all know the sad story of Badfinger. Anyway, that's Joey there. Next slide, please. Guess who this is? This is a jam session. Anyone recognise? I'm the one with the microphone. The guy on the left playing bass is the head of Warner Brothers, which is the label that my band then, Liverpool Express we were called. We had lots of hits all over Europe. Mainly in South America, we were #1 in every country with 3 songs. All over the world, nothing in America, again. The guy on the piano, you wouldn't have heard of him, but the guy on the right, who's the guy on the right?
Jimmy Page.
It's Jimmy Page.
It looks more Joey Ramone.
It's Jimmy Page. I haven't seen Jimmy for a couple of years, because he was on the road with a certain group. And he played on a couple of our records when we became the Merseys, because our management wanted us to have session guys as well. So on the original demo of a big hit that we had called Sun, so we had half of Led Zeppelin on a demo record, basically. So that's the story of that particular photograph. I can't remember what song we were doing. I don't think it was, I think it was a rock and roll song. It obviously wasn't a ballad. Next slide, please.
Oh, Peter. Peter was just here last year.
Yeah, there's Peter obviously right in the front. That's me on the top right with a beard. It was dead cool to wear beards then. This is 1973, when I was a pacemaker. So in the front, I'll just tell you the front. Wayne Fontana on the left, Billy J. Kramer, Herman or Peter Muir, Jerry Morrison, and then the four searchers there. Alright? And that's the pacemakers at the back. Then the Herberts, and then Billy J's and Wayne Fontana's backing band. But that was taken at New York Airport. I think it was before it was Kennedy Airport, am I right? When did it become Kennedy Airport?
63, I think.
Oh, I'm wrong then. That's Kennedy Airport, yeah. Next slide, please.
You know, Peter hasn't changed a bit. He looks great.
Yeah.
And he sounds terrific. He was
Yeah,
great.
I haven't seen him for quite a while.
He's great.
Yeah, he's he lived there.
All right.
Who's that?
Chuck Berry.
That's right.
Mr. Berry. He was our hero, one of our heroes, along with Buddy Holly, Elvis, you know, and the Shirelles, the Miracles, the Marvelettes. They were all our heroes in Liverpool. So to be asked, I was in a band then. We weren't a working band. We just made an album. We were called Rocking Horse, and the guy on the guitar there, playing acoustic guitars, a guy called Jimmy Campbell, who was an absolute brilliant songwriter. Sadly, he died about 7 or 8 years ago. Great songwriter. The drummer, well, we're going to show you a video, I think, of this. The drummer looks absolutely terrifying. Here we go. That's me on the bass with all the hair. You don't rehearse with Chuck.
Tempo of the music sort of failed for various reasons. There'll be stereos that go to show you never can tell.
There you go, Chuck Berry.
And you jamming with Chuck. That's great.
I just want to say, we had no rehearsals whatsoever. It just wasn't, when we turned up at a place in Lancaster University for the first gig, and Chuck was late. He was always late. And he just wanted to see the bass player. It was me and the drummer, none of the other guys. And he just said, look, you all know Chuck Berry songs, that's why we're all here, to play Chuck Berry songs. We said, yeah. And he said, okay, the bass player, don't want any middle licks, so if there's any bass, just been watching that. You know, all I did was bum bum, bum bum, bum bum, bum bum, and then bum bum, bum bum, bum bum, bum bum. and then boom, boom, all the way through every song, and I feel very embarrassed about that, so that's why I'm telling the story. And he said to the drummer, when I put my foot down, you start the song. When I lift my foot up, you stop the song. They were on musical instructions. Plus, I do all my songs, this is Chuck, I do all my songs in 4 keys. A flat, B flat, C or G. And we went, Chuck Berry playing in flats, no way. Anyway, I had to tell that to the other guitarists and the, the keyboard player. I told them what keys Chuck was going to play in. Remember that, E flat, B flat, C or G. The first song he did was in D. And apparently he does that to check your hands. So I made it my mind up during the first song, how are we going to get out of this? So I went to all the guys and said, okay, we'll wait for Chuck to start, because every one of Chuck Berry's songs starts the same. You all know what I'm talking about. So I said, when he starts, I'll slide up the bass and just say whatever key it's in. And it worked. It worked. So that was, I just got to tell you that story because I've never been on a tour like that in my life. We did enjoy working with Chuck, but he is one crazy man. Brilliant songwriter, but crazy. And I could tell you more stories about him, maybe later. Yeah.
You know, he recorded all his records on Chess Records right here in Chicago, on the South Michigan Avenue. Yeah, and there's a museum there if you're ever around downtown. Chess Records, it's great.
Okay, one more story of Chuck, just remember. You know, Chuck was always writing about Cadillacs and, great American cars. So everywhere he went, whatever country he went to, he wanted to drive. And apparently, when we first met him, he'd just been touring Germany and France, driving all over Europe. So when he was picked up at London Airport to drive up to Lancaster, he said to the road manager, his roadie, his driver, you can't drive, I want to drive. Okay? So Chuck drove from London Airport to Lancaster, which is about 300 miles. And they got there in about 2 hours. Do you know why? Well, the road manager gave his notice in as soon as he got to the gig. He said, I'm not working for you, Mr. Berry, anymore. And Chuck said, why? He said, you were driving 160 miles an hour up the motorway. And Chuck said, hey man, we're in Europe. It's not miles. And we said, no Chuck, it is miles an hour in England. Right. And Chuck went white. He lost his cool. He lost his cool in a big way. He didn't realise, he thought it was in kilometres,
Wow.
And even that was fast.
Wow, yeah.
So he didn't drive again. So that's Chuck Berry for
Billy,
next one.
I'm afraid we're out of time, actually.
Really?
But you will be back here tomorrow.
I'll be back here
And can
tomorrow.
we pick up with this slide, the next one, and continue then?
That's
Frida!
Good old Frida. That was about 3 weeks ago. That was her birthday. And my band Liverpool Express played at her birthday. Should I tell you how old she is?
70.
She's 37 now.
37.
That's what you told me to say.
Yeah, she was 35 last time I saw her. But we do have to, but we do want to pick up where we left off. Is that okay with you?
Is that okay?
Tell us more stories. And tomorrow, tell us the dirt on Frida, what we need to know, so next time we see her, we can embarrass her in public. Okay, because that's my job, to embarrass her in public. Billy, you have totally, you have totally met our high expectations, and that's amazing. Really love having you here this year. Thank you so much, Billy. Look forward to tomorrow. Plus, Billy will be playing tonight and tomorrow night with Liverpool, so we'll get to hear you play. Great. All right. Thanks, Billy. Cheers. All right. We could have gone on for hours. It's fantastic. But tomorrow we will pick up where we left off and do that. We're going to set up for some young musicians.